I was covered in cement dust, standing under a blazing sun, my back aching from 12 hours of non-stop lifting when she leaned out of the window of a silver luxury sedan. The soft hum of the car's engine was the only elegant thing in the entire construction zone. Her elbow rested delicately against the window frame, manicured fingers toying with the edge of her sunglasses as she looked me up and down like I was some kind of antique, once useful, now outdated. "Why are you still chasing me?" she asked, lips curling into a smirk that used to mean something. "You're just a guy with calluses and no future." The passenger beside her, Ryan, polished to perfection in a charcoal suit, didn't even hide his grin. He looked exactly like someone who had never lifted anything heavier than a wine glass. The two of them sat there like royalty surveying a broken subject. And I realized right then, Sophia wasn't trying to insult me. She genuinely believed I was beneath her. I didn't say a word, not because I didn't have anything to say. I had enough in my chest to tear the asphalt off the ground, but I knew whatever I said would become fuel, so I chose silence. I watched them drive off, her laughter echoing behind tinted glass like the closing line of a chapter I hadn't even realized I was still stuck in. That day, I stopped building other people's dreams and started building mine. Within a week, I packed a duffel bag and left the city without saying goodbye to anyone. No explanations, no drama, just gone. I took a night bus 4 states north to a steel frame development in the coldest region in the country. A company there was desperate for skilled labor. The shifts were brutal, the foreman even worse, but the pay was high and the distractions non-existent. It was perfect. I kept my head down, worked like I owed someone my soul, and saved every dollar like it was the last I'd ever see. Most guys on the crew wasted their wages on weekend whiskey and cheap thrills. I spent mine on online night classes, economics, business models, real estate strategy, whatever I could afford to unlock with a student email address and a credit card. I paid off every month without fail. I slept in a converted storage container behind the site, used a space heater to stay alive in the winter, and read financial reports by the flickering light of a battery lantern. I didn't complain, I didn't party, I didn't date, I didn't check Sophia's socials, not once, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew I wouldn't be able to look away if I did. By the second year, I wasn't just working construction, I was designing prefab modular systems that cut material costs by 30%. I pitched it to a contractors' union and caught the attention of a silent investor. By year 3, I was sitting at a long oak table across from 3 men in suits who once wouldn't have glanced at me if I were on fire. That day, I signed a deal to become a majority stakeholder in a rising construction tech firm built to dominate high-efficiency builds in the exact region Ryan's father had monopolized. I didn't smile, I didn't brag, I just signed the dotted line and nodded. The past didn't need to be rewritten, it had already served its purpose. What Sophia and Ryan gave me wasn't pain, it was clarity. They didn't end my future, they handed me the blueprint to it. I never wanted revenge, but life has a way of drafting justice into blue-collar hands. They called me a man with no future. They were right, because the future I ended up with didn't belong to them, it belonged to me. John didn't look like a man anyone would expect to lead. At 26, he kept his face clean-shaven out of habit, not vanity, and his black hair, cut short and mostly flattened by a hard hat, rarely saw daylight without dust clinging to it. He wore the same faded canvas work jacket through all seasons, and the creases in his hands weren't from age, but from 10 years of cement, rebar, and scaffolding. But if you watched him on site, you'd know he was more than just muscle. He had a stillness that wasn't passive, it was calculating, observant. A man used to watching, absorbing, and staying 10 steps ahead without announcing it. People didn't notice John when he entered a room, he never spoke unless needed, never bragged about hours worked or loads lifted. His name only started to circulate among senior contractors when tight deadlines got met without a word of complaint, and when impossible logistics somehow got solved on the back of coffee-stained receipts from his back pocket. He didn't come from wealth. Raised by a single father who laid bricks for a living, John grew up in a rented apartment 3 blocks from a steel plant. His earliest memory wasn't a toy or a cartoon, it was learning how to mix mortar by feel, no measuring, just instinct. His father passed away when he was 17, no trust fund, no savings, just tools, 1 old pickup, and a quiet kind of pride. By 19, John had a full-time job at a construction site and a side hustle repairing tools for older workers. By 21, he was running his own crew, respected for his fairness and discipline, and by 23, he met Sophia. She wasn't someone you'd expect to find near girders and dust clouds. Sophia was all light linen and expensive perfume, a fashion management major with big city dreams and a social media account curated like a lookbook. Her world was woven from boutique cafes, limited edition handbags, internship talks, and friends who always smelled like designer cologne. But on one rare day, during a university volunteer construction drive for a housing project, John saw her. He offered her a water bottle and a clean towel. She offered a thank you and a smile too polished to be fake. That's how it started, a shared project, a few text exchanges, a walk after sunset. Against logic, against contrast, something clicked. Sophia liked the way John listened, not performatively, but genuinely. She told herself his rough hands and quiet manner were grounding. Something real in a world where everyone was constantly performing. And John, for all his restraint, fell quickly. He didn't just fall in love, he invested time, money, support. When Sophia struggled with a business finance course, John taught himself the material just to tutor her. When she couldn't afford professional clothes for an interview, he spent his entire bonus check on her outfit. He never said it aloud, but in his head, her success felt like his responsibility. He helped her get internships, calling in favors from clients he'd once worked for, updating her portfolio in PowerPoint late at night on his busted laptop, even helping translate industry terms from Chinese brands she was sourcing. He believed in her more than she believed in herself. And at first, she was grateful. But time did what time always does, it exposed the fault lines. Sophia was ambitious. Not just I want to succeed ambitious, but I want to rise fast, be seen, be recognized, outpace every version of who I used to be, ambitious. And John, no matter how much he gave, always looked like the past she was trying to escape. She never said it, but he felt it. When she asked him not to meet her classmates, when she cropped him out of pictures because the background wasn't aesthetic, when she started talking about career networking events he wouldn't enjoy, he understood. Still, he stayed, not out of pride, not even love, but because he didn't want to believe she'd trade loyalty for optics. Then came Ryan. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room and command attention without saying a word. Tall, with a confident gait and a voice that always sounded like he was just finishing a TED Talk, Ryan was the son of a well-known real estate developer whose family owned most of the luxury apartment projects downtown. His suits fit like they were designed around his ambition. He had a way of making even the simplest compliments sound like business pitches. He noticed Sophia at a gallery event hosted by one of the design firms she interned for. John hadn't gone. Sophia said it wasn't really his scene. Within weeks, Ryan was dropping by her campus, casually inviting her to rooftop mixers, tagging her in photos that made it look like they were already a thing. When John asked, Sophia insisted it was professional, that Ryan just liked helping young talent grow. But then she was invited to the gala. It was the biggest industry event of the semester, a red carpet affair hosted at a private waterfront hotel, attended by designers, investors, and executives. Sophia's eyes lit up when she got the email. John knew the date, he also knew it landed on their 3-year anniversary. He didn't say anything, he just watched as she struggled with whether or not to invite him. Eventually, she said it. "I think I should go alone, it's important to network, and, you know how you get in big crowds." He nodded. The day of the gala, he helped her zip up her dress, held her coat, drove her halfway to the hotel before she told him to drop her at the corner so no one would see the truck. She said it with a soft voice, as if cushioning the impact. He didn't argue, he just said, "Good luck." She kissed him on the cheek, stepped out, and walked toward the glowing venue, heels tapping like punctuation marks to a sentence that hadn't fully ended yet. John drove back alone. That night, he didn't eat, didn't scroll. He sat in silence, staring at his calloused hands, asking himself how far a man could stretch before breaking. The next morning, he woke before dawn. Not out of habit, but because he knew, he was done waiting for the world to notice. The ballroom was gold-drenched, the chandeliers casting light like fire off crystal flutes, waiters moved silently between tables carrying hors d'oeuvres that cost more than John's daily meals. Sophia stood near the center, wearing a champagne-colored dress John had never seen. He wondered if she bought it just for tonight, or if Ryan had. From across the room, Ryan raised his glass and clinked it gently against his cufflink before launching into a toast. "Here's to the builders of dreams," he said, tone dipped in performative warmth. "Not the ones laying bricks, but the ones designing futures. After all, anyone can pour cement. It takes real vision to create something lasting." A few polite chuckles circled the group, but Ryan didn't stop. "Construction guys, they're like scaffolding. You use them when needed, then take them down once the building's up." He laughed at his own punchline, eyes flicking toward Sophia with casual entitlement. She didn't laugh. But she didn't speak up either. She just sipped her drink, smiling faintly as if pretending not to notice where the target landed. John wasn't in the room, but someone sent him a clip the next morning, an anonymous message with no caption. The moment he watched Ryan speak those words, the glass in his hand didn't shatter, but something colder did. Later that evening, Sophia called him. Her voice was soft, unusually careful. "John, I think we need to take a break," she said. I need to focus on myself, on what's next. I've been offered a shadowing position on a fashion expansion project, and there's travel involved. It's not you, it's the timing. I need to figure out who I am without distractions." Distractions. That's what he'd become. He asked no questions, offered no resistance. "All right," he said. She hesitated, maybe expecting anger, or at least a plea, but none came. Over the next few weeks, her social media told the story she never confessed aloud. Pictures of her with Ryan, his hand on her waist, brunch on rooftops, business class flights, hashtags like #partner in everything and #vision board sat under filtered sunsets. Then came the photo that made John pause, not for anger, but for irony. It was Sophia standing barefoot on a sleek wooden deck, holding a wine glass, hair blown slightly by wind. The caption said, "Peace begins here." But John recognized the place. He had poured concrete on that patio himself 2 summers ago. The beach house belonged to a developer he once worked for under a subcontract before Ryan's father's company bought out the project and delayed payments for 6 months. The house had been a milestone job for John. Now, it was just another backdrop for someone else's curated life. He didn't comment, didn't like, didn't message. The next day, he handed in his resignation. He didn't explain much to his supervisor, just said he needed to leave the city. He packed what little he owned, threw it into the back of his truck, and drove west until the buildings thinned and the air got colder. He ended up on a wind-battered site near the mountains. A mining town, mostly forgotten by the world, where companies still built on raw rock and workers lived in repurposed trailers. The hours were long, the conditions were worse, but it paid well, and no one asked questions. At night, while others drank to forget the cold, John stayed in his unit, 2 steps above a storage shed, typing on a refurbished laptop he bought off a retiring electrician. He researched MBA programs. Some rejected him immediately, others never replied. But one night, he received a short, formal email that made his hands tremble over the keys. "Congratulations," it read, "you have been awarded a full academic scholarship to our executive online MBA program. Classes begin in January." He didn't celebrate, just stared at the screen and then closed the laptop slowly, like sealing a door. He stopped checking Sophia's posts altogether. He deleted every conversation, archived every photo, and wiped his contact list down to people who had grease under their nails. Months passed, then a year. By the second winter, he wasn't just another foreman. He had optimized their material acquisition pipeline, cut overhead by 22% and was quietly writing white papers for small business construction magazines under a pen name. Contractors began asking his opinion on pricing strategy. He never said yes to any interviews. One morning, his shift supervisor approached him with a frown. "You applied for time off?" John nodded. 2 weeks. "Where are you going?" He didn't answer. The man didn't press. He left the job with no farewell party, no ceremony. Just a firm handshake and his last paycheck folded into an envelope that smelled like motor oil. By the time Sophia launched her second fashion line, with Ryan now publicly calling her his co-founder and muse, John was already sitting in the back of a finance summit in Chicago, quietly observing panel discussions on infrastructure innovation and sustainable housing. He no longer wore boots and stained jeans. Now it was slate jackets, muted ties and watch bands made of black leather with no brand logo in sight, not to impress, but because everything else was noise. His name was starting to appear in low-profile newsletters. A few startup blogs called him the silent architect behind several modular design systems being used in high-efficiency builds across the Midwest. He never corrected them, he never granted an interview. He preferred his quiet. By the end of his second year in the program, John had declined job offers from 3 large firms, instead using the funding he'd saved to form his own consulting partnership. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't viral, but it was profitable, efficient, and growing rapidly. He disappeared from Sophia's world entirely, not by accident, but by precision. She didn't know where he was, didn't know what he'd become. But she would. Eventually. Sophia's rise was steady, but not quite hers. After breaking into the fashion tech space under the mentorship of Ryan's contacts, she quickly became a recognizable face at panels and product previews. Her brand name, Vura, was whispered at rooftop cocktail parties and featured in digital editorials that praised her modern reinterpretation of minimalist wearables. Her interviews always included phrases like, co-founded with industry support, or leveraging smart capital partnerships, all polite ways of saying Ryan bankrolled the dream. To the outside world, she was radiant, poised, positioned for long-term relevance. But within the glossy press photos and flattering filters, Sophia started to notice the fine print of her own life. She wasn't just admired, she was curated. Ryan managed everything, her brand's PR tone, the color palette of every launch, even which photographers she could work with. Every dinner invitation they accepted was a negotiation. Every compliment she received came wrapped in his approval. You wouldn't want to dilute your positioning, he'd say whenever she expressed a creative idea that didn't fit his vision. We've built something cohesive here. We, always we, never her. What started as thrilling partnership began to feel like branding servitude. She smiled through the launches, stood beside him at events, reposted the headlines. But more and more, she found herself staring at her phone late at night, reading old messages from a number that no longer appeared in her contact list. John never posted online, never commented on anything. It was like he had vanished entirely, and that silence bothered her more than she cared to admit. One evening, while getting ready for an investor dinner, she asked Ryan casually, "Do you ever think about where people end up after they disappear?" Ryan, adjusting his cufflinks, replied, "If they disappear, it means they're no longer relevant. Focus on who's watching now." She didn't ask again. Months passed. Then came the invitation. PitchBridge 2025, Emerging Founders Competition. Sophia submitted her latest product, a line of ethically sourced modular accessories with tech integration. It was sleek, visually appealing, and sustainable. The kind of thing marketing departments salivate over. She didn't expect to win, but she did expect attention. The event was sponsored by the Grayson Group, a private investment collective known for backing founders who combine technical innovation with cultural relevance. Their capital had built 2 unicorns in 3 years. But more elusive than their funding was the mystery around who the lead partner was. No one had seen his face. He never took interviews. Every profile described him the same way: anonymous, efficient, impossible to read. The competition was held in an auditorium wrapped in concrete and glass, the kind of place where every chair looked like it cost more than a month's rent. Sophia arrived with a team, but Ryan was missing. "Client call," he said. "You've got this." She stood behind the curtain, clutching her pitch notes, watching the screen track the previous contestant's timer. A staff member leaned over and whispered, "Judging room's packed today, lead investors in person for the first time ever." Sophia blinked. "He's here?" The woman nodded. "Nobody knows what he looks like, though." Sophia's pulse quickened. The presenter before her finished. The lights dimmed. Her name was called. She walked to the center of the stage under a spotlight, every movement rehearsed, every word polished. She introduced her product, showcased its layers, aligned it with market demands. Her voice was confident. But something was off. There was a stillness in the room that didn't feel like focus. It felt like observation. Not from the judges. From someone else. In the front row, a man sat with his arms loosely crossed, dark muted suit, clean lines, no tie. sharp eyes under a composed face that gave away nothing. Something about his posture unsettled her. When their eyes met, only for a second, her words fumbled. Her mouth kept speaking, but her rhythm broke. She rapped early, applause followed, she bowed and walked off, stage faster than planned. Backstage, she leaned against the wall, catching her breath. Then the MC's voice rang out. Next up, founder of Fortress Framework, specializing in high-efficiency adaptive design systems. Please welcome, John Stone. The name hit her like a brick to the chest. She turned her head just as he walked onto the stage. It wasn't the man she remembered. Gone were the old jeans, the calloused hands gripping a phone too old to scroll. Now, his hands were relaxed, suit sleeves resting precisely against his wrists. No dramatic change in posture, no arrogance, just presence. The crowd shifted as he began speaking. His voice was low, even, but every word landed with weight. He wasn't selling a product, he was showing them a new future. Sophia stood behind the curtain, heart slamming in her chest. She didn't know what shocked her more, that he was here, or that he hadn't looked her way once. Not even once. John walked off stage to thunderous applause, briefly nodding to the organizers as they directed him toward the green room. Sophia lingered, debating whether to follow. When she finally stepped into the hallway where the private rooms were, she saw him alone, sipping water, reading the schedule. She called his name softly. John. He didn't look surprised. I saw your pitch, she said. It was powerful. He didn't thank her. You looked nervous during yours. She flinched at the honesty. How long have you been with Grayson? She asked. I don't talk about timelines anymore, he replied. Just outcomes. Sophia folded her arms. You left, completely, no messages, no closure. I gave you closure when you asked for space, John said calmly. I just respected it harder than you expected. She laughed once, empty. I didn't know you'd end up here. I didn't know either, he said. But you gave me the push. There was no anger in his voice, just clarity, and that hurt her more. I was wrong, she whispered. About a lot of things. John looked at her for a long moment. Maybe. But you were right about one thing. I didn't have a future. She opened her mouth, confused. He stepped closer, voice steady. Because the one I have now didn't exist until I stopped trying to fit into yours. And then, without malice, without affection, he walked past her toward the elevator, vanishing into the hallway lights. Sophia stood still, her name echoing silently in her own mind, long after the doors closed. Sophia caught up with him outside the venue. The air was cold, heavy with the smell of pavement and wet iron. John was waiting by a black car, scrolling through his phone. No driver, no entourage, just him. She stepped forward, hugging her arms. John, wait! He looked up, no warmth, no contempt, just distance. What more is there to say? She faltered. You've changed so much, I didn't expect. He slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. No, you expected me to stay where you left me. I didn't leave you, she whispered. You chose someone with status, John replied, eyes fixed on her. Now live with that choice. The driver arrived before she could speak again. John got in. The door closed. The window rolled up without a sound. He didn't look back. It unraveled faster than anyone expected. 3 weeks after the competition, headlines began to circulate. Developer's son linked to investment fraud. Anonymous capital arm under investigation for embezzlement. Ryan's face was everywhere, not in curated brand promos, but pixelated mugshots taken outside a corporate building in handcuffs. The story was simple. He'd siphoned funds through a shell investment firm under his name, propping up startups to inflate valuation numbers, then funneled capital back into his personal accounts under consulting fees. Sophia's name wasn't in the early stories, but the photos were. Red carpet appearances, joint interviews. Partnership documents where she stood beside him, smiling and nodding while he described the financial foundation of Vura. At first, she tried damage control. Her publicist issued a statement. Ms. Sophia Wren had no knowledge of Mr. Ryan Carter's financial operations and was never involved in any transactions related to the subject of the investigation. But the silence from former investors was louder than anything the PR firm could write. Within days, her inbox turned cold. Scheduled campaigns were postponed indefinitely. Fashion show invites vanished. Collaborators stopped answering. A public list of brands cutting ties with Vera began circulating online. She tried reaching out to designers she once mentored, friends she'd supported. Nobody responded. One friend messaged her in secret. "They think you knew, or that you should have." Sophia tried to push forward. "We'll rebrand," she told herself. "Start fresh." Then the leak hit. Screenshots from internal emails between Ryan and his accountant showed Sophia's name listed in recipient CC fields on transaction summaries. Whether she read them or not didn't matter. Her initials were there. That was enough. Online commentators were merciless. She was either complicit or blind, pick one. All that fake sustainable branding while she raked in dirty money? You can't accidentally accept $1 million. And worst of all, John dodged a bullet. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat without feeling sick. Ryan was unreachable. His father cut him off entirely and refused to pay his legal fees. The penthouse Sophia once shared with him was seized in an asset freeze. Her name wasn't on the deed. She packed her things in silence and left in the back of a rideshare, her boxes stacked in the seat beside her. Days passed. Then a week. Her phone stopped buzzing entirely. No job offers, no invitations, no message. No noise. Just the endless hum of news cycles slowly burying her under the next scandal. Out of desperation, she typed his name into her email's draft bar, John Stone. The system autofilled his address, still stored, still untouched. She typed a message, deleted it, wrote another, deleted that too. Eventually, she sent one line. "I'm sorry, I never knew how much I lost until now." No reply. 3 days later, she emailed again. This time, longer, honest. She apologized for how she dismissed his worth, explained how Ryan used her image, admitted she knew, deep down, but chose comfort over confrontation. No reply. She waited 2 more weeks. On a grey morning full of silence, she found herself outside a glass office building downtown. She recognized the logo from a small article that had profiled John's firm. Discreet, growing fast, the kind of place where everything was done by design. She stood at the reception desk. "I'm here to see John Stone." The receptionist checked the system. "I'm sorry, Mr. Stone doesn't accept unscheduled visitors." "Can I leave him a message?" "Certainly." She slid over a branded notepad. Sophia paused, then wrote one line. "Please give me 5 minutes, I just want to say this face to face." She left her name, her number, then walked outside and waited in the plaza across the street. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then the lobby door opened. But it wasn't John, it was a woman, tall, chestnut hair, calm eyes, holding the note. "Ms. Wren?" the woman asked. Sophia stood. "Yes?" "I'm Deborah," the woman said politely. "John's partner." Business or personal, Sophia didn't know which word stung more. "I just wanted to deliver a message from him." Sophia nodded slowly. "Okay." Deborah unfolded the note. "He said to tell you this exactly. I heard what you said on stage. I understand, but my life no longer intersects with yours. I wish you peace." Sophia's throat tightened. "That's all?" Deborah's expression softened, but she nodded. "That's all." Sophia forced a smile. "Then, thank you." Deborah nodded, then walked back inside. The glass door closed behind her with a soft, final click. Sophia stood in the wind, alone in a plaza full of people who didn't recognize her anymore. The room was filled with people who had already decided they wanted to be him. Rows of aspiring founders, media professionals, and investors packed the summit hall. Cameras rolled from every angle. A banner above the stage read, "National Entrepreneurship Forum, the future builders of industry." On stage, 6 chairs were filled with leaders in tech, construction, and venture capital. John sat in the middle, calm, composed. His black suit was simple, pressed, no pin, no brand visible, no unnecessary shine. He leaned back as the moderator opened with familiar questions: market adaptation, sustainable expansion, startup retention. John answered each with concise insight, never overselling. When asked what drove his company's early-stage efficiency, he simply said, "Discipline and silence. We let the numbers speak." Applause followed. It was clear who the audience came for. John's company, Fortress Framework, had become a case study in minimalist dominance. While others raised bloated capital rounds and overspent on image, John bootstrapped for 2 years, then scaled with quiet precision. His operations now supported municipal housing builds in 7 states. His model had no fluff, just results. The moderator smiled. "John, you've said before that your story started with a lot of noise, emotional, financial, even personal, yet you built in silence. Why?" John looked out at the crowd. "Because the people making the loudest noise back then didn't want to hear what I had to say. So I learned to speak through outcomes instead of arguments." A ripple of applause spread through the audience. Phones lifted, notes were taken. Then, it happened. A voice, shrill with desperation, broke the rhythm. "You abandoned her, you let her fall." Everyone turned. John's jaw tightened, but his body didn't move. The voice came from the far right aisle. A woman was standing, shouting through security already closing in. A commotion started, cameras swiveled. It was Sophia. She looked thinner, eyes hollowed, makeup smudged, coat too loose on her frame. She wasn't holding a mic, but her voice carried anyway. "John, you just disappeared. You didn't even give me a chance to fix it." A hush fell. The moderator stood halfway, signaling the guards. John lifted a hand calmly. "Let her speak." The guards froze. Sophia's breathing was ragged. Her voice cracked. "I was wrong. I thought wealth came from suits and logos. I thought the man with the clean hands was worth more than the man with dirty ones. But real wealth was always you." She swallowed hard, shaking. "You weren't just building apartments. You were building a future, and I walked away from it because I was too focused on what looked good in photographs. And Ryan, he was just noise. But you were the foundation." No one moved. John sat still for a long time, then leaned slightly forward, mic in hand. "I wasn't angry because you chose someone richer," he said evenly. "I was angry because you saw my dirt-covered hands and assumed they'd never build anything valuable." He paused, the silence held. "You didn't betray me with your choice. You betrayed the version of me that believed we were on the same team. You traded loyalty for presentation. And once I saw that, I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want to build for someone who couldn't see value in the dust I carried." Gasps, whispers, a few attendees instinctively applauded, then stopped, unsure if it was appropriate. John continued. "You didn't fall because I abandoned you. You fell because you stood on someone else's shoulders thinking they were stairs." Sophia's knees gave out, and she sank into the seat beside her, shaking silently. Security didn't approach her again. She didn't need to be removed. She had removed herself. The moderator cleared their throat awkwardly. "Mr. Stone, would you like to?" John nodded once, interrupting gently. "Yes, I'd like to continue." He didn't look at Sophia again. Instead, he answered 2 more audience questions on investment pacing and emerging market risks, his tone never wavering. When the panel ended, he stood, buttoned his jacket, and exited through the side door as the room erupted in a standing ovation. Not for the drama, for the man who said more with silence than most did with microphones. Backstage, John washed his hands at a quiet sink. Someone from the press asked if he'd like to comment on what just happened. He didn't answer, just dried his hands, nodded politely, and stepped outside into the overcast daylight. A black car waited at the curb. Deborah was already inside, waiting with her tablet, reviewing calendar details for their upcoming board meetings. She looked up as he entered. "You're still trending." He glanced out the window. "Let it pass." She touched his wrist. "You handled it with dignity." He didn't respond, but the silence between them was warm, not heavy. As the car pulled away from the summit venue, John rested his head against the glass, eyes half closed. Somewhere behind them, a chapter had closed on its own. He didn't need to sign anything. The silence was signature enough, and Sophia. She stayed in her seat long after the panel ended. No one approached her, no one acknowledged her. She had come looking for closure. Instead, she got a mirror held up in front of her entire world. When she finally stood, her hands trembled. She left through the back exit, unnoticed. The sound of thunder in her ears wasn't the crowd, it was the realization that the man she thought was beneath her was now the platform everyone stood on, and she was the one without footing. 2 months later, in a packed auditorium of union workers, policymakers, and journalists, John stepped behind a podium with no logos, no corporate banners, just a single phrase printed in muted gray across the front: built from the ground, for the ground. Flanking him on either side were men and women in safety vests, steel-toe boots, hard hats tucked respectfully under one arm. Behind them stood educators, architects, project foremen, and apprentice welders, people who'd spent their lives in the background of success stories, finally being pushed to the front. John spoke plainly, as always. "There was a time I believed success meant climbing out alone," he began, "but the truth is, everything I've built was made possible by people who taught me the value of work before wealth." He paused, the room leaned in. "So today, I'm returning that value where it belongs." The crowd stirred. He continued. "The Stone Foundation is officially partnering with 22 union chapters and 6 technical colleges to launch the LIFT initiative, a 10-year scholarship and housing plan to support over 3,000 blue-collar workers and their families." Applause erupted, cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward as he detailed how the foundation would provide trade school tuition, financial literacy courses, and subsidized housing for qualified workers looking to transition into leadership roles across the industry. He didn't quote economists. He quoted his old foreman, who once told him, "Sweat dries, debt doesn't." He smiled. "We'll also be offering microloans and property matching grants for those who want to start their own firms, because no one should have to choose between paying rent and building a legacy." By the time he stepped down from the podium, John had already trended across 3 business news networks and every construction forum online. The story wasn't about luxury, it was about dignity, and the man delivering it wasn't wearing a watch that cost more than a month's wages. His sleeves were rolled just enough to show the faint tan lines still burned into his skin from his old job. Outside the building, cameras chased him toward the waiting black sedan. The sky was gray. Rain fell in a steady curtain, and in the middle of the marble steps stood Sophia. Soaked. Holding something small in both hands. The moment the cameras noticed her, they paused, not sure if they were about to witness another headline or a quiet ending. John approached slowly. She didn't speak immediately. Her eyes were red, not from tears, but the kind of fatigue that comes when life refuses to pause, even for your guilt. "This is yours," she said, offering a small, weathered object wrapped in a faded cloth. He unwrapped it. His old watch. A cheap leather-strap Casio he'd gifted her when he couldn't afford more than diner dinners and walks by the port. She used to wear it like it was luxury. Back when they still believed time was something they had plenty of. "This is the only thing I never sold," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't keep it because of what it's worth, I kept it because of what it meant." John looked at her, not with resentment, not even pity, just quiet recognition. "I remember that watch," he said softly. "You said it looked like something timeless." She nodded. "I didn't understand what you were back then, I only saw what you weren't." He nodded once. "That's the thing about value. You can't always see it until it's no longer in your hands." Her grip tightened on the watch, eyes pleading. "Do you ever think we could have made it work if I hadn't?" He didn't let her finish. "Sell it," he said gently, "or keep it as a reminder. Either way, I'm done building for people who don't see my value." Sophia's lip quivered, but she said nothing. She stepped back as he walked past her. The cameras didn't follow him now. They stayed focused on her, still standing in the rain, still holding the watch, still watching a man she once believed had no future walk into one she would never be part of. At the curb, Deborah was already waiting beside the sedan. Her umbrella angled just enough to shield him without blocking his view. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. John reached out, and without hesitation, Deborah took his hand. They got into the car, no words, no stares, no theatrics. Just 2 people moving forward. Sophia stood alone on the steps, forgotten by the lenses now chasing a new headline. From cement dust to millions, John Stone rebuilds the system he rose from. And behind that story, buried beneath interviews and accolades, was a quiet truth no one could quote or headline. Some foundations aren't built to be revisited, they're built to be left behind. The city skyline no longer intimidated me. Every glass panel I passed reflected a man I recognized now, not the dusty foreman begging to be understood, not the boy who once believed love meant lowering yourself to be seen. Just John, just me. I stood on the rooftop of a building my firm had funded. It overlooked the district where I once worked minimum wage and ate cold meals between shifts. That same block now had housing projects bearing the name of the men who taught me to weld, lay brick, pour concrete with care. Not my name, their names. The wind brushed against my collar. I didn't shiver. Behind me, the evening news was playing on a phone someone left on a bench. Another panel segment, another article calling me visionary. I didn't care about any of that anymore. They called me self-made. They forgot how many hands held me steady when I thought I'd fall. They forgot how many laughs I had to swallow when I showed up at events wearing shirts one size too big because I couldn't afford better. They didn't see the looks, the glances Sophia used to give when Ryan would arrive in his polished shoes and monogrammed cufflinks. But I did. I saw all of it, and I remembered all of it. From scaffolding to skyscrapers, from heartbreak to headlines, every insult she threw became the stone I stepped on. She once rolled down her window and laughed. You're just a guy with calluses and no future. But calluses are just scars that learned how to hold weight. And the future? She said I had no future. Turns out, I was the future, not hers, not Ryan's, not the one shaped by brand parties and gallery openings. The future that builds quietly, one that funds families, one that lays down bricks not for applause, but for permanence. The kind of future that doesn't chase validation. Because some futures don't come back for those who gave up on them. I walked back toward the stairwell, buttoned my coat, and closed the rooftop door behind me. Some echoes weren't meant to be heard again. They were meant to be outgrown, silently, permanently.